Welcome back. We are here with the famous Gingerbread Dan, and today he's going to teach us how to make some gluten-free bread.
Yummy.
I understand that you've won a few awards in the past for your bread.
Well,
that's just a word on the street.
Yeah, in 2011, I did win the Denver County Fair Bread Baking Award. I made a nice loaf of ciabatta bread.
Oh.
It was very glutinous, but it was delicious.
I love that shirt. Real men bake bread. That's awesome.
Real men bake bread.
What kind of inspired you to get into baking?
So when I was in middle school in 5th grade, we had this assignment every week called the Wonder Journal. We'd have to wonder about something and usually solve a problem. So I'd wonder about how do airplanes stay up? How does fake wrestling work? Stuff like that.
Right.
And usually it'd just be something you could look up in books. But then one week we have to do something hands-on specifically, so I'm probably not going to figure out how airplanes work this week. So instead, I said, I've always liked eating bread. Maybe I'll learn how to do that.
Right.
So I go up the street to the professional baker. He hands me this bread Bible, this 200-page bread book, a Bread Baker's Apprentice by Peter Reinhardt. And he shows me this 15-page recipe on sourdough, and I'm like, this is maybe a little bit intense, right? But I take it home and I'm mixing flour and water together. I'm capturing wild yeast from the air. I'm doing all kinds of stuff.
This is crazy.
And so.
And how old are you?
I'm 19 now, so this was 9 years ago. I was 10, and so I make this loaf of bread. Yeah, it takes like a week, but in the end, it was the best loaf of bread I'd ever had.
So it sounds like you know a lot about kind of the art of baking. So where does gluten come into play when you're in the kitchen?
Well, gluten is very vital to baking bread. Right. Basically, the idea of gluten is it's a protein that kind of acts like a kind of elastic. And so what you have to understand is that when you're using most yeasted breads, the yeast is producing alcohol and carbon dioxide. Now, the alcohol contributes to the flavor, but it's the carbon dioxide that makes your bread rise.
Right.
Now, carbon dioxide is a gas, so if you just have kind of like flour in a bowl or something, it won't trap it. But if you develop that gluten and use it like elastic, then you can almost think of the dough as like a balloon, and so you're actually when that gas is coming in, being developed from the sugars in the bread, the bread is rising, and the elastic and the gluten is kind of keeping it all together. So when you have gluten-free bread, obviously you don't have that elastic, so it's harder to get that rise. You end up with a much denser loaf. That kind of thing. It's really tough.
So the main ingredient that differentiates regular bread from gluten bread, would you say?
Definitely the wheat flour. It's definitely wheat flour. Yeah,
okay.
Gluten is a protein that you find in wheat flour, and there are high gluten flours and bread flours that have specifically more gluten in them to make better breads for that kind of thing. But when you're using gluten-free bread, usually you're using a nut flour or a rice flour because that doesn't have that protein in it.